What's up, Chris? Welcome, y'all, to another amazing episode of BANGover Productions podcast. Today's an album, and we're talking about one of the greatest bands in my mind. Like, for the past 2 years, this is literally all I've been listening to. Here and there, other things, but if you sit in my car, I have every. I still have a CD player in my car, and I have every Fugazi album in there, and I just rotate them. And whenever I don't feel like plugging in my phone, fucking just turn on Fugazi. Like, I'm only going down the street to the gas station. One song. That's gonna be great. They're always great. But today we're talking about A Steady Diet of Nothing, which critically, I guess fan-wise, wasn't their favorite album. I mean, it was critically acclaimed. They all are. Like, if you look at the reviews,
I mean, we got
fucking 8 out of 10. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we have Rolling Stone 3.5 out of 5. Spin gives it a 9 out of 10.
Damn.
All Music 4 out of 5. So it's like you're saying, critically pretty strong, and fan wise, some people argue it's one of their best.
Yeah, and that being said, it's still like the least favorite album by all the fans, including me. In some ways, I love this album, and don't get me wrong, I'm like saving a lot of like their other albums, like end hits. I've listened to it a little bit, but I haven't deep dived like those first 4, which I'm like, I just want to consume this and then have this. I'm saving this for later, like little morsels. But it's not the one I usually rotate the most. Like we were talking before, End on the Kill Taker. Holy shit. Like, that's one of my favorite. And then Red Medicine, and then obviously we have Repeater. But this is their second album, and we're definitely going to deep dive into this album really hard. But first, we want to start off and maybe talk about Fugazi and where they came from and how they got started with all this stuff. And it just goes back, and we all know founding member, fucking Ian MacKaye from fucking Minor Threat. And so this is where it all started. Ian MacKaye, Minor Threat, breaks up. And he goes through multiple different projects. And his biggest one in his mind was called Embrace, I think. And I didn't even know that one, because my favorite one, Palehead, for sure. It's 6 songs, whatever, call it whatever you want. Maybe not a real band, but if you haven't listened to Palehead, we might put a link in the description or something. That album's amazing. You just take pretty much Ministry, and you put Ian MacKaye in front of Ministry, and that's it. And it's fucking awesome. Same thing with Lard. Take Jello Biafra, you put it with Ministry. Amazing. Some of the best punk industrial type songs I've ever heard, and they're fun. And still to this day, if you're a fucking fan of Ministry, the industrial scene, or an Ian MacKaye in any way, then you know that album. One of my favorite, Embrace, not too sure. I'll go to it, but I'll check them out. But that being said, like, Minor Threat, I love Minor Threat. Remember, we used to cover a lot of songs. Well, we covered those 2 songs.
Yeah, that was those 2.
They're fucking fast. I mean, we loved it. And what were the 2 songs again?
I don't know.
Come on.
I can pull it up real quick. I'm sure it's...
You slam them back to back. That's how you play them. Like, one goes into the other. Why can't I think of this? Because we've been talking about this album so much. Like, I'm not
kind of on this one.
Yeah.
Fill some time. I'll do a little research here.
Okay. Okay, so back to the story. Ian MacKaye kind of felt, I guess, a little bit weird. This all come from Wikipedia. But, going through music for so long, bands breaking up, forming another band, breaking up, kind of feeling a little like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this, right?
Filler in My Eyes?
Yeah.
Was that it?
No, it was Filler and the other song goes back to back. In My Eyes is really good, but it's Filler and...
I Don't Want to Hear It?
I Don't Want to Hear It.
Okay.
You got to do it back to back. Yeah. Because you just immediately go into the other one. That's what made it so fun to play. Man, I still have those old recordings.
Yeah, those were great. I mean, those songs are so fun to play. They're classics. And I mean, even I'm sure playing these Fugazi songs, maybe not ones on this album, but like you're saying, Fugazi is the band in general. It's a great band to maybe cut your teeth with. Learn some of their songs. And
it would be, I think, quite difficult, some of these songs. I've been playing drums for quite a while. Like these drummers kill 'em.
You have people nowadays, learning like crazy. So
I think I should look that up, like drum covers of Fugazi, and be like,
considering they're not really a lead, they're not cranking solos. It's like
that's true. It's a lot of rhythm.
Exactly. It's probably a lot of power chords. Really, something you could like if you're a cover band or not a cover band, but a band starting out, and you need like a good song to play. Maybe dive into a Fugazi song because they're pretty hardcore punk rock, but you can also find something that's a little chill and relaxed.
And they're very dynamic. Like if it kind of sounds very simple, but none of it is simple. Like their arrangements, the way the instruments are like planned out, it's
that
not
could help
simple.
That could help
as an up and coming band to really figure out some of those things.
Like learn songwriting if that is your, it's one of those.
True.
Learning like us doing the covers of those old punk songs, learning formation and like leading into that kind of helps with. I don't know. I feel like doing those old punk songs and all just in general the covers were like a good stepping stone. So it's
those old punk songs helped us like develop our thrash metal skills because they were like easier than learning a Slayer song. So we could start off here and still have that speed and intensity of just like that skank beat and then moving between parts, like moving that fast to work our way up to something like Slayer. You know what I mean? So it was like a good start into, the realm of thrash. Just, I don't get to do that skank beat enough, in my opinion, anymore.
And like the song Reclamation, that was that speed picking part that's just like tremolo picking. I mean that's thrash, that's death metal. I mean you're just
it was just holding that there as the rhythm section just
but it's just so melodic. So you take away the
probably two guitars doing that as well, both guitars, and it really
they're
it's like we were saying when we were listening to it, it's such like a reggae sounding song, but it's that sound on top too that really has that feeling of like, there's a lot of punk still in this.
It's the rhythm section, like you're saying. It's the drums, the skank beat. It's the slow 4 on that song, that slow snare hit compared to the guitars going crazy. If you sped up that snare and those drums, and the bass, that's a whole different band. That's like,
I think that would just be a Minor Threat song.
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, so this is where we get with it. Like him breaking up that band, he forms a new one, finding members from other bands. These guys come from other bands. The newest drummer I knew came from Rites of Spring, which
is this guy? I don't have his. Is it Brendan?
Yes.
Canty.
Yes, I didn't know how to say his last name. I never do how to say last names. I never do last names.
Like candy, but with a T.
Oh, thanks for teaching me that.
Canty. That's the way it looks. I don't know, maybe it's pronounced correctly.
He was the second drummer, I believe. The first drummer, another band, he had to leave for, I think, that other band. But he came along, and then he got the bass player.
Joe Lally.
Which later on, I don't know, like, I have to go back and listen to some Rites of Spring, but holy fucking shit, this rhythm section is amazing. And it started off as being amazing to the point where it's just like known to this day as one of the best rhythm sections of all times. To this day, look it up, people. Like, this rhythm section knows how to move and groove. And anytime I talk to my bandmates, especially my bass player, all I ever bring up is Fugazi and like how Fugazi works. I want to work that way with my bass player. It's really like so great. And then Fugazi's guitars lay upon top of that with their weird kind of like sound effects and the way they operate the guitars. And it's so much different from what the rhythm section is doing. That's 2 layers. And then we go into the vocals,
and that's
which is
multi-layered as well.
and always having both people sing in every song. You know what I mean? To give it that dynamic each time, always. You know, I like the back and forth they do sometimes.
They're bridging
it's really
that,
good.
like that gap where it's like the punk rock. They're having the melodies between the two singers, the melodies between the 2 guitars. So they're taking this different approach to the hardcore music at the time,
which I think where the reggae comes in. Which I don't listen to a lot of reggae, but it kind of seems like it's a little bit more spread out, and each section has its own jam, and then making an overall song all together. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of instruments in reggae bands. I don't know a lot about reggae. All right.
Been to Marley Faster.
Oh yeah, but not for fucking 10 years.
I mean, I'm sure you remember the stage is crazy full of like.
Yeah, and it's like it feels like the same beat over and over again, just adding different shakers.
I mean, if anything, it's probably just backing singers that you're having like 3 or 4.
Yeah,
maybe a percussionist, and then a drummer, and then
an actual drummer on a drum set, a percussionist, a guy on the bongos.
Yeah.
You know, like some guy with a fucking tambourine, just dancing.
That's a lot of people. So
There's always a lot of elements, I believe, going on in any big band. You know what I mean?
Like that world type music. So
it's really awesome to hear a band like this make that big sound with 4 members. It's just it like reminds me of bands like Megadeth in Opinion, where it's like we'll be talking like 5 members and it sounds, or like no 4 because he sings. So it's 4, like it sounds like a fucking concert. It sounds like an orchestra.
Yeah,
you know,
and this is
the production.
Rick Rubin hitting it, and I mean this album, the album that we're kind of talking about in general, you can tell it doesn't have that producer feel compared to other Fugazi records, which I think we have mentioned, and I don't want to say enjoy more, but
but because hold on, folks, because Fugazi is that band. In my mind, that is like, no one can ever say they ever did anything really bad. They're kind of like one of the greatest bands. This is just like a weird album, and we're definitely there's a reason why that is, and we're gonna get into that. But first, we have to get to where we are now in the story. Okay,
yes.
So he gets the bass player, he gets the drummer. They start playing together. And then, as Wikipedia put it, you know, like the singer for Fugazi will become the future singer, Guy. He was the singer for Rites of Springs, where he just wanted to come into some of their practices and kind of like see how his friend was doing. And then he would later on to say, this is like a little quote, he was like, I was really like, you know, harboring thoughts about like really wanting to join this band when I heard them practice. Like there was something about it. But things didn't work out then. They play a couple of shows just as a 3-piece, and this is when he comes up with the name Fugazi, because they had to come up with a name for the band on the fly. It was like everything in this band kind of just seemed like it was just falling in place. Like he wasn't sure he wanted to do music. He finds an amazing rhythm section. They're like, yeah, let's play music. Because how he put it, he didn't want to start another band. He wanted to find people that wanted to play music. And that was the idea behind it. It wasn't like, let's start a band, let's call it this, I have an idea to do something. It was more like, I just want to play music and not be held to any type of standards of, is it punk? Is it metal? Is it rock and roll? Like, is it reggae? It's just music, and I just want to play music. And that was the approach, it feels like. So Guy comes in, sees a few practices, and then they go on tour without him, and then eventually schedules just work out. And Guy joins the band. And he starts doing a lot of singing. Before he even, I think he was like kind of like the main singer at this time. This is before like still right here in like, they started in 87. And this is like between 87 and 89 where they're just kind of like floating. Everything's just getting going, really. And he sings a lot. And I think after a tour that they went on or just the first couple of shows, he was kind of bored with singing. So he picked up and wanted to play guitar full time. And I think this is where the dynamic comes from, that Ian was supposed to be like lead, but was the singer before Gary came in and then became the singer. And then he kind of wanted not to be the lead singer. So went to the guitar.
Guy.
Yeah. So they're both lead guitars and they're both lead singers in this band as of now, like how these albums will come out later on. So this is where this dynamic comes from. He wanted to play more guitars. So going on more tours or just shows, and what it is, so we were talking about this as Repeater is their first album, but I think it's called, in my notes, the first EPs that they did, So they did these 2 EPs, and they slammed them together to make 13 songs, which came out in 89.
Okay.
So...
But they are recorded originally.
Yes,
so
because you can't really count this as an album as much as in a compilation, hence the name 13 songs. And then adding 3 later on to the repeater. But we didn't even get to the name and what it meant, and we weren't really sure either. But it's taken from a book, a Mark Baker's book, Nam, and it's a bunch of compilations of Vietnam stories. And in this, it kind of like comes across, and this is like we read it, but still didn't know what it meant, so I'm just going to say it out loud. Fucked up, got ambushed, zipped into the body bag. So I think it's kind of like one of those made-up words that they used in war, I guess. Like this is something a slang term that they would use in the Vietnam War for whatever fucking reason, getting ambushed for one reason. We said kamikaze, Fugazi, so it's like...
Yeah. I could see.
We're still trying to figure out what "foo" and "com" means. Leave in the comments below, and if we're fucking up this story in any way, please correct us and leave some more comments, and we'll redo episodes on this. We're gonna do every album, I'm sure of it. We just have to wait for the dates to line up. So, getting back to the story, having him join the band and everything, they pretty much slammed those 2. It was Margaret Walker. I say that right?
Walker. Yeah, Margin Walker?
Yeah.
Margin?
That was one of the first EPs that they released, and then took both EPs, I don't know what the other one was called because it's not listed, and slammed it into 13 songs. Upon returning from their European tour, because they just went on tour with having these EPs, I guess, and I guess they had a bunch of songs
just
in mind.
Playing those, it's just a random collection of songs.
Yeah, so they had 13, they could go on tour, and they just, so a long tour over in fucking Europe, at least 8 to 9 months, and then getting back to immediately going to the studio in 1990 to record, which is kind of one of their best album, Repeater, which is so fucking good. You've listened to Repeater before, right? We're definitely going to do an episode on this. Amazing. Every song.
It's a classic album.
It's so good.
The cover, I mean, everything about it is like, I mean, it being also their first full length, so then you have that kind of reputation with that. You know, most bands' first albums are pretty good. So it's about the follow-up. Yeah.
It's always about the follow-up, and we're going to be getting to that follow-up. So in this, it's kind of like they transformed into this jamming type of band, and then that's where these songs really show, like on Repeater, like the band that they kind of became after it. I listen to 13 songs all the time, but it's definitely not one of my favorite things ever.
No, but it does have their most catchy /
one of their biggest songs, Waiting Room,
the most popular song. I mean, arguably
the
most popular song.
I would go with the song Repeater. I don't know. There's a ton of songs, to be honest.
Well, even then, to this album, it in their catalog of music, top played. There's not very many singles on this album. There weren't actually, I don't think, any single on the album. And then considering their other releases, where you have classic songs that are like in movies or in pop culture. Whereas, I don't think they really had anything from this album that maybe was outside of the album. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas, you had I've heard other Fugazi songs in skate videos or maybe a short film or,
They were always, this was their thing, the DIY, the do-it-yourself kind of thing. Yeah, maybe working with a producer and an engineer, but still doing everything their own. They're on his record label, Discord, from the get-go. Probably why they got their push and went into Europe, if you kind of think about it that way, because Discord was kind of pretty successful in the underground scene of getting those underground bands noticed, and even teaming up with all the other underground labels, especially to get these first EPs released. They teamed up with SST, which we know is owned by whatever the fuck from Black Flag. Craig Dean.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Glenn.
That's cool.
Glenn? No. Yeah, so this was a multiple, to get the right money in to go into the studios. I'm sure they're kind of just like moving money, like just trying to get, because it's all DIY, so no one's sponsoring anything. They're not backed by anything big. And still, even going in and doing Repeater is still on Discord, which is a small label, to say the least. They don't have big dick swinging monies to go in there and like fucking slam down millions on recording, you know? Like, I couldn't believe that when I learned that. Like, Pop Stars, like the amount of money it cost to put those albums together. I was just like, holy shit, you know? Like, in a band like this, who knows what their budget was when they went in there. But they're all great musicians, and they all had an idea of what they were kind of going for. Not really. They always were loosely based. They were just like, play music and see what comes out. And you could hear that on Repeater. And working with the engineers on Repeater and the producer,
I think it's the same. It's the same engineer, I think, from Repeater.
Yes, he will be on every album, I believe. Yeah, for the most part.
For at least
for pretty much
these first three, I'm for sure.
Yeah.
And then we have the producer on that album, who at the time I believe was, let me pull up his name real quick.
Notes.
Nicely.
Where are your notes?
Yeah, Nicely. I think his name was Ted Nicely. And he, I think at that time, was studying to become a chef during this Repeater era, producing albums, learning to cook food. And I believe on this album, he was asked to come back, produce, and he declined because of school or because of his chef opportunities, being a chef. So
probably maybe more of his passion. Who knows?
Maybe, but then he comes back on the next album, I believe. So it's this weird point in the band's life as far as their sound, and even the personal lives of like the people behind the music.
Because going a little bit forward and a little bit back, skipping over all this, like these two producers and engineers working together on the first album, him leaving, becoming the chef, they do 2 more albums, and then he comes back just because it's like we're missing a little bit of something, I think.
He comes back after this album. So
after this one?
So literally that's why this one's the only self-produced, and it's a weird sounding one. And when you compare, like when you look at the ones that are sandwiching it as far as the book ending it to the, you know.
Yeah, so this is how it goes down. He leaves right after Repeater. Repeater does pretty damn well for an album that has barely any promotion, you know, under behind it. Selling like, I think in the first, it was like, holy shit. I was just looking at their tour dates. Like that was very intimidating and how many shows. But selling like 300,000 copies at first, which pretty fucking good for an indie label. But later on, overall, selling like over 1 million in the US and 2 million worldwide. And this is DIY ethics.
Those are like, crazy numbers.
Yeah, that's pretty fucking crazy for an album that it did it itself.
Yeah.
It didn't have radio play. I never fucking hear Fugazi on the radio, you know? Not in Austin. But
well, I think like you say, that first album hit and it just made a big wave in the scene, right? And the sound. And I mean, Ian MacKaye has a background also. So we got to think of that. This isn't like, you know, this ain't whoever the hell coming out with the band. This is somebody who's already been an established artist. His
name alone is like
brings people. Yeah. So I mean, I think what happens is you have that on top of them sounding good, and then it's just a straight like projection, where it's like
you get all the punk rockers, and then other people that aren't really like that into punk listening to this music is like, dude, it's fucking pretty good. It's a good time frame too, right? Yeah. Because this is an alternative sound, essentially. This, and especially this album, is before Nevermind and Pearl Jam's 10, which is kind of like a big fucking deal when we talk about like how like those two albums,
the music landscape of the time,
dude, for real.
So,
and if anything, dude, to think about like if this was on an actual major label, I don't know if they would be able to pull it off and sound so good, because I think their DIY is kind of why they are the band that they are. But if they had pushed behind this album, to think about how big it would have been at that moment in time, you know? and how it would probably change the course of a lot of other bands. It would definitely rock the boat on like a band like Nirvana.
Yeah.
And the whole scene around it, where it's just like, oh, fuck, what is this? You know what I mean? But they didn't have like super heavy fucking label, fucking,
I think maybe
Interscope Records, like with an iron hammer, be like, you want to hear music?
You kind of hear that Fugazi influence maybe in
from those bands, yeah.
Exactly.
Because I guarantee, like it's always been about a diehard fan base when it comes to Fugazi, because you have to know who Fugazi is. You have to be shown. Like us, we were shown who Fugazi was, given because we were in kind of like skateboarding. I think that's exactly how we found Fugazi, from you and Ryan. Ryan, rest in peace. No, he's not dead. Ryan, where are you right now? We're talking about Fugazi. You just run in here and just start rambling, dude. Oh my God, he showed me so many good live videos. I was just like, I fucking love you, dude.
One fan of Fugazi right there. Or
he
just
got
Ian
us
McKay.
there. Yeah.
So.
And he got us there, and I remember him introducing Fugazi to me and being like, it was all right when I first heard him. Mm-hmm. I was like, it's fine. There was a lot of things I liked, but this is one of those bands that just takes a little bit of time, and it will grow on you. Yeah. Like Creep Show with the green moss, just like that. It will cover your whole fucking body by the end of it, and you will be obsessed. But it wasn't until, this is a funny story, my old job, which I'm not going to say where it was here in Austin, but one of the owners decided one day, I'm done with my CD collection. And he takes boxes and boxes of CDs and tosses them in the dumpster at work. I wasn't even there. I was at I think I was at a band practice with us before we were even Flooded Tombs, the name anyways. But I come to work, and the barbacks before me dug it all out. And he was into all this type of stuff, where it was like, definitely, like, I have every In Living Color album, like those groups, like,
weird.
Dude, yeah.
He's probably got Suicidal in there. He's got like just
Suicidal, Faith No More,
yes.
A lot of the hip hop that was going on in that.
Like,
it's that chunk from like 97 to like 91, classics. Pretty much. Yeah. And had like every fucking Fugazi album, at least 5 of them, I believe, in there. And that's how I got all their albums. And I was like, I'll listen to it a little bit more. And like I said, just popping in the CD player and just being too lazy to change it to something else, kind of. I was like, oh, this is cool. And then it's getting stuck in my head.
Yeah.
And I go to work, listen to it, and I leave work and I want to listen to it again. And I wake up and I want to listen to it. And it was really like one of those, like, I never felt like a kid. Like I haven't felt like a child listening to music like that in a while, Like when you feel like when you were a kid, like it meant more to you. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That Fugazi does remind me of like I
was 30 fucking years old, and it was like hearing music for the first time again in some ways, because I heard it and it was like, okay, it's fine. And I heard it again, okay, it's a little bit better. And then I heard it again, I was like, that's pretty fucking good. And I heard it again, and then I'm fucking obsessed. And that's where it all fucking started with me and Fugazi. And this is why we're talking about it today, because I brought this up, because I was like, we have to do this album. And this album's weird. So getting to a steady diet of nothing, first we're going to play a song. And what are we going to play? Latin Roots.
Latin Roots.
If I told you, I was like, dude, you have to check out this song, Latin Roots. What would be your first, you'd be like, what is this? Well, maybe me and you'd be like, is that like a Soulfly song?
Well, on the album, it's one of their, I would say, if there is a single or a most played song, this is one of them, at least fan-wise. Streaming-wise. And then, from a songwriting and sound standpoint, it definitely on the album is more energetic than probably the first. We're at song 5, so the first 4 songs, I would think Latin Roots is kind of where it starts to pick up a little bit. Exit Only, of course, it starts out strong, but then you kind of, Reclamation, like we were saying, it's got like that slow drum beat, but the fast guitars, so then I think Latin Roots was where the tempo starts to actually kind of up a little bit.
So, yes, getting into this, it's still like, this is a very big change. If you listen, this is not if I were going to be like, okay, you want to get into Fugazi? This is not the fucking album I would give you.
No.
Not at all.
Yeah, no.
But this is like definitely a part, and this is a big part of the story of how they got here, and doing it all DIY and losing that producer and still going in there and not knowing at all what they wanted to do still. Even after doing that first album, Repeater, coming to this, still like, so what do we do? Again, you know, second album. What do you do on the second album? That's what makes and break shit, right? So does it work? I think it does. And we're going to get into it. So let's play the song. That song is definitely one of my favorite songs on the album, for sure. Even though it has like I was reading that one, some guy on punknews.com.
Get all your trusted news. Punk News.
Punknews.com.
Oh, yeah. Shout out to Punk News.
Shout out to Punk News. I actually liked the review he did on it. He really talked about it like how we're talking about it now from a fan standpoint. And it was kind of like, you know, all your friends that are in this band as well, they're like, man, this was, you know, it's not my favorite album. And so he's just kind of like a little timid at listening to it at first. And then coming back to it and then listening to it, he was just like, there's some songs that aren't that great. And there's a lot of songs that are, but that's the first time he says in their career that in some ways or in some fans' opinions, and maybe their own, because there's songs on here they won't play live for whatever reason, that just weren't that good. like usually every Fugazi, like their albums, every song is just as good as the last one, if not better in some ways. But here's like a lot of songs that were like kind of like weaker than most Fugazi, but still, like he says, 99.5% better than any other band. I mean, right? If you hold this to, if you even took their weakest songs, it still blows a lot of bands out the fucking water, for sure. They're not weak in any sense of these are not good songs. It's more like for Fugazi and how people perceive what Fugazi is and how they sound. These are considered like not the greatest.
Well, they're still
developing,
pun intended, getting their roots planted. Like you say, they have this other guitar player coming in. Singing is starting to get this weird dynamic where, you know, like
they're learning a lot more.
They're still trying
learning a lot
and
more.
You can hear them learning. I think they're learning not only music, like how to write together and perform, but they're also learning production because they're doing it themselves.
Right. And second album. So where do you go from Reclaimer to? And doing it by themselves, they lost that producer. And going in there, and we were talking about that before, not really knowing, still, like this is like the band's motto, like not really having an idea what to do, but let's see what the fuck comes out. And then I think there was just a lot of experimenting and using different like techniques and not knowing where to go. There was a lot of quotes in here where it says in the Wikipedia about recording this album about like how difficult it was and how hard it was.
Yeah, there's a few quotes from people like Guy and Ian, and like specifically like Ian saying like it was like we were walking on eggshells trying not to offend each other. No one would say turn your guitar down or turn the drums down. So we ended up getting a democratic mix, and a lot of times democratic mixes equal bad mixes. And I feel Steady Diet is a classic example of us being very conservative, although a lot of people think it's our best record. So it's
still crazy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The how like I read it in one opinion how like it's one of their weakest, and then still being critically like acclaimed by fans and fucking all the rave they got about it.
Maybe that's why they don't play it live, because it's there just as a bit, you know, you're ever unhappy about something and it's just like
as a band, everyone else is like, no, it's great. Like I know that more so than anyone. That's like, no, you guys are great tonight. You sounded great. And I was like, no.
Yeah,
I know what fucking great sounds like.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And they are that type of band. I think they really do have a vision of what they were trying to go for, and maybe people not getting it out.
But them themselves just fighting that inner artist and trying to produce something that is, I mean, you're like, again, they're just learning. They're in the process of learning all this stuff. So you're going to have a few hiccups, stumbles maybe in the process. And that's fine, because like you say, these albums that come after where they're, you know, also, I mean, the album after they got this Ted Nicely to come back, but I believe Fugazi's also credited as the producer. So they were, at that point, after doing this album,
making decisions.
They were like, you know what?
They were making decisions on how things should,
so,
on levels and stuff like that, which they were just performing.
In some ways, you can look at it as like a blessing and a
curse
in some
right?
ways. Like,
because great albums do take great producers and engineers behind it. It was, in some ways, never just a band on its own. That being said, this is kind of one of those things where it's like, no, you still fucking can do it, and it could still sound amazing, especially if you have a vision and you really believe in that vision, and you will not take someone else's opinion or advice, even in the studio. And I've heard great stories about.
Well, this is this is like what you're saying.
Right.
Nobody's giving that opinion or advice in this example. You need that producer.
They were saying it was kind of bad on their own, but you could still, like, sometimes you should put your foot down on what you want. Like, if the producer's like, I think it sounds better like that, and you're just like, no, trust me, like this is gonna sound great. I mean, that cattle decapitation was so funny because the producer was like, I don't know, man, I don't think this is gonna sound good, when he was like holding his tongue and singing. He was like and he was like, no, trust me, it's gonna sound good. And then the final mix, one of the best things I've ever fucking heard. I was like, dude, no, he was right. Sometimes don't listen to if you have a fucking strong opinion.
If you have a vision, But I think we're learning the vision in these points of the story, and so you have Guy. They're coming off all this touring, and that's kind of where he's coming from.
So much touring. Like how many dates?
I didn't look at the.
I could tell you how many shows that they played in one year.
This is for Repeater.
Yes, from like 1990 to 1991, heavily touring off of fucking Repeater. Between March of 1990 and June of 1991, 250 concerts, and then immediately going in there. And like, I think that's more so than anything of them just being fucking tired, dude.
Sure. I mean,
and even in Repeater's case, they were tired going in doing that after coming back from a European tour and then Repeater. And then touring their ass off again, and then fucking here comes this next
going
album.
across, coming back and forth that many, and then 360 days a year. I mean, that is not a lot of time off.
And in this day and age, in this time in music, you had to come out with an album right away. Like it has to be once a year, or you're forgotten. You know what I mean?
This is before we have the internet too, and all this type of thing. So speaking to that, I mean, Guy quoted, "It was a tough record for us to make. It was our first attempt at producing and mixing by ourselves, and we didn't feel like we really had a good handle technically on what we wanted to do, and we were pretty fried from a shitload of back-to-back touring. I appreciate Steady Diet for a lot of things, but there was a flatness to both the performance and the sound that was weird to us." So, self-admittedly, it is not,
It is kind of a low-level album. I can put it on full blast on my headphones and be like, not that loud.
Yeah. I mean, not even from a loud. I don't know what song it is. There is a song on here. I mean, to that point where like, if you just boosted some levels, and there's probably other examples, but maybe pump up the drums a little more here, kick the guitar in a little more here.
Right.
You could change the dynamic of the whole album. It shows how mixing is like a big. It can influence the sound, even if the songs are kick ass, which they are, because there's
I think being a band and playing those songs and coming up with those songs and then performing those songs and then recording those songs, and then you're gonna sit there and mix those songs. Like, I don't think you like the band, any band or the musicians in it has any idea what this should actually sound like, because to me,
it's a lot of work.
It doesn't sound like anything at all anymore. All I can think about is my performance on it, everyone else's performance, time frame, were these lyrics on time. That's all I think about. That's all I care about. Yeah. I don't think about, is the bass drum loud enough for this part? Because I've done this song so much that I can't even possibly fathom like that kind of like, I think the guitar should go up a little bit here in my mind. I don't know, where it's just like, you need someone else to be on the outside. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
also at the time, like in the early 90s recording. I mean, maybe they were dabbling and experimenting with digital, but I don't think this may have been recorded to digital. It's, there's in the studio at this time, think of the equipment that existed and you're learning on that equipment. This isn't like where it is nowadays where you can just buy an all-in-one piece of gear and look at the instruction manual and you pump up demos all day.
Yeah.
This is like 4 guys in a room working on mixing an album, 11 songs, and trying to make each song cohesive. When it's, that's a hard task.
You listen. I've seen you go insane trying to mix one of our albums. And like, just withered down to a man where you're like, I don't fucking care anymore what it sounds like. I'm not adjusting anything. I'm like, I think there should be more snare. You're like, I'll fucking stab you. I asked you how much snare
also,
you wanted.
For this album, they only recorded it in a month. January to February.
Just went in there and slammed it out. 11 songs.
So either that is, that's them going in there probably with that inexpertise and being like, let's do our best on this, like kind of, go into a room and track it. Who knows if they overdubbed,
Would they go in there with like just a kind of ideas for songs and then kind of write a lot of it in there and like trying to capture the magic of like coming up with the song and like doing it the first time around and being like, Holy shit.
Well, it's that, like you say, you're doing 260 dates. I mean, you've got to be coming up with material along the way. I mean, it seems to be the trend is like you go on tour and you come up with all this fresh material because you're,
because you got a lot of in-between time.
Yeah, there's in-between time. You're listening to other bands you're on tour with, so you're just getting more influenced, and you're just like pumping material out. So maybe that's what happened. With them at least, they're playing all these dates, get all these songs accumulated, 11, enough for an album, and then you're like, okay, well, we want this guy to produce, and he's like, okay, I'm living my life. I would love to, but I can't.
I'm cooking food.
Yeah.
Are you guys hungry?
I'll feed y'all.
But I can't record y'all.
And so where they're as a band, you're stuck with either finding a producer, a new producer, which, as you were saying in the dynamic, that's a whole new dynamic to get.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know what? Let's just do it ourselves. Everybody at the time is probably DIYing it. It's probably that's a growing trend. It is still today. So there's that kind of like mystique about it and awesomeness to it being all produced by the band, and this is the band in its purest form. You're never gonna get any.
Oh my god! In my opinion, like this album is definitely. I wouldn't take any song out of place or move any song around. Or when I listen to this album, I don't immediately go to a song on the album. Like I'll skip through it. I started from the beginning and go all the way through, and that's what makes this album really fucking awesome. Like, I think that's the best part of this album is not individual songs, it's the overall and how each song is set up and where they're placed. And they just flow into each other. Like we said, it starts off pretty quick. And then kind of slows back a little. And then we hit Latin Roots, and then it kind of like, that's quick paced a little bit, it starts off pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then we're kind of up again, and then we kind of like dip her down. But towards the end of this album, it really does get really fucking, really exciting. So it's like moving like a wave, and you just got to listen to the whole thing from start to finish. Like if you're really going to get this album and like this album from start to finish. And it's not that long. It's 36 minutes for 11 songs.
I don't have the exact
36 minutes and some change or something like that. But I mean, that's on your way to work and on your way home on the other half. You know what I mean? So it's. I would suggest listening to it all the way through.
Sure,
and that's what I think. Maybe if I was to say, like, if I was to guess, maybe what they were going for when they were mixing the album, like you said, some things could be boosted here, some things could be more spruced, and wouldn't that really change the dynamic? But I think they really wanted that steady level.
Just broad, kind of like
across the playing field of that mix. But the only thing that moves up and down, like level-wise, is the way they play songs in their performance.
So and guitars coming in and out.
Yeah.
It's like...
They did it themselves. It was like they didn't even bother to like move the knob up and down. They were just like, I'll just play louder. I'll just go softer. You know what I mean? That's kind of what it felt like. They were creating their own. And dude, that's fucking... quite amazing. And it's like kind of doing it the hard way, but I think this is the way that they knew that they could do it, is making it like that in your performance. Like I don't imagine a lot of EQing went into any of this. I believe a lot of sounds on this album, all the instruments are the raw sounds, in the sense of like that's kind of how it sounded when it was recorded, and everything just got like mixed to be more level. If anything, drum, if there was any mixing,
the kick is real flat. It's not like punching through the mix.
No, but it sounds like how the bass guitar sounds.
It does sound like the bass guitar in that it's real flat and dry.
Right.
It's real, like there's not any distortion. He's just coming straight bass to amp, and it's probably on
no
the clean,
pedals.
It's probably on the clean channel.
Right.
There's no drive. Like it's.
We were talking about that before. Like they don't use a lot of pedals. It's really straight to amp, and if they have these weird guitar parts, and what do you like? Bending strings, turning on and off pickups, turning up and down knobs on their own, instead of like using a pedal to portray it that way. Which is, watching them play live is pretty fucking cool because of that. Because they really do like turn up and down to get those sounds. You know what I mean?
When you're doing that and you're not stepping on things and having to worry about stepping on things,
they do dance.
You can focus on performance.
That's true too.
When you're not having to worry about, oh God, at this point of the song, I got to run back over there and hit this button, and then I can run back and party. but I got to make sure I run back over there and hit that button.
I know, like in big bands, like super awesome arena bands, they probably have a guy back there, like click.
They do. When you know your huge bands, you got a guy in the back, and it's all just pedals aren't even on the floor anymore. Yeah. They're in a rack in the back, and you might have a guy hitting it, or it's all like one button set up to do multiple things. So it's at that point.
Yeah, so, one guy waiting for that part in the song, just click, and if he's off, God, he's gonna get his ass chewed out. What the fuck was that?
So that's it's amazing that they kept it pretty dry when it comes to just guitar, amp, Ian, just using a Gibson SG right into a Marshall stack.
So I said,
freaking
like the drums sound like it's just you got the room sound in the drums.
I don't know what the drummer was playing as far as his kit, but playing awesome. That's what he's doing. But I mean, then you have bass player Joe doing. He's just playing out of some Fenders and maybe an Ernie ball every now and again, straight bass to amp, and his amp's Ampeg, which at that time it does sound like an Ampeg. It's that dry, but it cuts through the mix.
I love the tone. It's just I like that clean cut.
Yeah, and then you have the other guitar player who is also he's rocking. Let's see, he's got Rickenbackers and some Gibson Les Paul Juniors, and so I mean it's a little weird that he's playing like these semi-hollow bodies, but also their music does have those little low points.
You get those little like
and he's just going straight guitar amp with maybe like a pedal, like a one overdrive pedal, just maybe for leads and soundscapes if there are any.
It's more just seems like when they hit chorus. When they hit their chorus, it gets the guitars get real high up there, and it allows the vocals to almost be like underneath in a way. Like the guitars are so high at this point,
I feel like
they go over the vocals, and the vocals like sit where the guitars set this album, on the verse. Yeah.
Typically, when I'm listening to Fugazi, it's like the vocals are clearly over the mix, but he's not really screaming a lot of the time, right?
Sometimes
he does. Yeah. But I just mean like whenever it is like that, he's like just kind of, it's almost like speaking, singing. It's weird. He's got a melody to his voice.
You're talking like Ian's voice?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ian's voice, he has the scream and he has the talk voice.
Yes.
Where he talk sings.
It's talk singing.
Yeah,
and it's
talk singing.
You don't need it, like there's not a lot of intensity in the performance. So in the mix, you can pump it up pretty loud and it's not overbearing for the audience.
Never. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They're pretty. I think that's what makes them so good of a band.
So you can hear the music. Yeah. If he was screaming those lines, doing his screaming part on the singing, talking part, like his voice, it would, affect that dynamic of hearing what's going on in the background.
Hearing the music.
The music.
Yeah. But the music is like very important just as much as the vocals are. You know what I mean? And they really thought about that too, where that's what makes the band so fucking great. Every part is heard in the mix. You can hear the bass. You've listened to a lot of fucking rock and roll or metal, and you can't hear that fucking bass at all. You know what I mean? But this, it's like you can hear every single part. And there's two guitar players. Usually when there's two guitar players, the bass player is kind of fucked. You know what I mean? Like he's just in the background to keep that back fucking rhythm. And it's just that tone more so than a sound. You know what I mean? It's a feeling. But this, it's like it's the main line. Is the bass riff is the main riff. This is where it's all coming from. And then the drums in that building this, and then they sing and use their guitars like if they were vocals as well, just weird little random things, whatever it calls for. A lot of times you would not use the guitar on some parts because it was like, it just didn't want to add too much to it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The bass and drums are already amazing. So this kind of has that straightforward level. And why don't we get into our next song? What is it? Long Division?
And this is another maybe single / most listened to song on the album, and it's one that people kind of point to the most as far as like the way their sound is dynamic with bass and guitar weaving and all this. So we'll dig into it and check it out.
I always thought that was like, in my mind, that was never like an individual track. And that's what I was like bringing up before, because I was like, no, I'm like, the chorus on this song is great. And you're like, there is no chorus. This is it. And I'm just like, oh shit, it just leads that fucking well into the next song, where I don't even think I thought of it more like as an opening, because it's so fast, and it just the next song is where I keep thinking like, yes, this is where this is gonna go.
Shortest song on the album, 2 minutes and 12 seconds. And I mean, first minute was like instrumental, kind of leading into.
Just like we said again with the talky talk vocals, and it's just fucking pleasant. It's very fucking. This is why this band is so like well received by fans. It's always just so good to listen to, and they really do pick the times on when to just chill out and when to fucking bring the energy and the power into their songs, and using their screams, which they can fucking definitely do, and blowing you away with soundscapes that is just so fucking heavy that you're like, holy shit. You know, I could think of the beginning of some songs where it's just like, where we're getting to, baby, you know? Yeah. Next song coming up. It's like, I have so much to say. The title for this album was another thing that we really couldn't. It was going to take such a deep dive into like how that was actually perceived, but I guess it was like a quote of Bill Hicks. Yeah, a steady diet of nothing. I think it's an overall like type of maybe it was like a joke that he had, but it was more like he never said those lines. It was more like every time we looked it up to try to find where it comes from, it was more like the entire word or the phrase "a steady diet of nothing" was wrapped around other words like these kids
just
all they get. Yes,
alluding to.
But this is what it stands for. It's like it's a steady diet of nothing. That's kind of the punchline, I think, behind his joke, if you will, when he tells that joke.
There's a setup.
And then the steady diet of nothing, which is great. And bringing that up, like picking that line for this, it's a Bill Hicks, obviously known for a lot of political, politics, or like he just had a lot of thoughts on things, which, no, it's like great, like really pointing out shit that people should have been paying attention to, and he's the only one that was paying attention and having to yell at people to be like, why don't you see these things that I see, and just trying to get it out there. This is exactly maybe what this album's about as well. Like, sorry about my dog scratching in the background. That this was like, the lyrics are very much based around that when it comes to this album. It's very political. Getting into the song, the last two songs of the album are the most political, and it's kind of like their stab at the Gulf War that was going on at this time. Yeah. And so this whole, I'm not, okay, I didn't deep dive too far into the lyrics. Like, the music is so good. We're trying to just talk about that. We're just like, fucking the music's amazing. But if we were going to go into the lyrics, this is definitely a very political album in some ways, where I think the end song, KYEO, was about like a Rodney King incident that happened, I think, around this time frame as well. If I was going to research that a little bit more, I think 91 sounds about right, or if it was a little bit earlier, whatever. But they were talking about political stuff. Minor Threat has always been a very political band. One of their live performances I saw, like if you can find on YouTube, it's Fugazi playing in like DC in front of the White House. Like they always had this like stab at like, it was very political, but at the same time, it's more like how the Bill Hicks thing is. It's like he didn't study politics. He's just pointing out these things
to what's happening. So
yes, in society around him, and like in the things that are like that those people in power are not seeing because they're not looking on the way that they're looking in. We're standing from the outside looking in on this. You're in the middle of it. It's the same thing if we were talking about the producer. Like, you're in the middle of it. You need a producer that looks outside and can tell you, hey, maybe this would work a little bit better. You know what I mean?
Turn up.
Turn it up. And I like how, like, if we went back to that song Latin Roots, and I think even they were saying Long Divide, if we were there too, it was like influenced by this Stuart Copeland like influenced drum beat. And that's probably like coming off the, I want to say, I thought it was the 4, but I just woke up a little while ago, so I'm not really counting. Plus I've drank so much Red Bull, but it probably just like hitting on the 1, but it's not like the 2 and the 4. You know what I mean? Just hitting on that back beat, like way back on the 4 count beat, in the beginning or the last beat, and probably was on the 4 just because you wanted a little before the first beat. It created that rhythm, that Stuart Copeland, drum beat. It's just kind of like a really cool, and it's kind of a little bit of a reggae dub kind of thing influenced, where it just has this groove, and they just kind of groove, and especially that song we just listened to, Long Divide. What a groovy song, and that's kind of how it like
for 2 minutes.
Yeah,
grooving. It just takes that.
Yeah, for 2 minutes, and it's like I said, you really have to listen to the whole album all together because that's like a low, especially coming from like Latin roots. Long Divide was track 7, so it was like picked up on those 2 songs, and then it just kind of like trickles down for a little bit, but then obviously picks back up in this whole thing.
I was doing some research on like releases of the album because of the mixing.
Right.
Like maybe they remastered and reissued it. Maybe they went back into the studio and fixed it, or quote unquote fixed it. Well, they didn't really do that in a sense. There was in 1991, the album comes out, right?
Right.
You have that version, but then in 2004 there's a CD remaster reissue, which I guess to just keep the reissues at the time. Who knows how much remastering actually went into it, and if it was even promoted as like a remaster at that time, like heavily. You see it on the tag, remastered. And what does that mean?
Reissue, release, remaster.
What did that mean? Did the band go back in there? Was it Ted, from Ted Nicely going back in there? No. Was it the engineer? I can't remember his name right now, but was it him going back in? Probably not. Was it the label who remastered this? Yeah. And so then that was in 2004, but then in 2009 they remastered and reissued the vinyl. So, at that point, maybe there was a vinyl surge, and then Discord or whoever's publishing and printing at the time.
Right. Maybe they're because we're in 91, and the way that they transferred it onto vinyl back then was not as good as we could do it right now.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
So that
why
could
not
be
redo that? Yeah.
But there was never a proper release. You go onto these streaming sites, or even there's deluxe editions, or it's for anniversaries typically. But
right, brings us to the next fact of how this album, when you try to find out when it came out, is just July.
Yeah,
and that's why I said, what a great episode for me, because I have all of July to do it. We're definitely at the end of July, but I was like, I have to do it sometime in July. That's it, so I can nail this one out, and it just says July, and that's probably why they were just like, ooh, when they came out with it, or just like, here's another album, we're just gonna go right back on tour.
But how much did you say the last album did?
Like in the beginning, it was like 300,000 copies.
300. This one, I looked it up, and it was 160,000 pre-orders before it was released. So they probably have this like band puts out the album.
Holy shit!
Huge fan surge. They're eating it up. Sell over 500,000 records on the first one, have almost 1/5 records pre-ordered for the second one. Let's just go ahead and put it out. Maybe it wasn't a scheduled date. Maybe it just like came out of nowhere, and it's very weird. You can't find that date, and that's not logged, or was it just released sporadic? It's very weird. It just
seems like if we could maybe take more of a deep dive into this in further episodes, because we'll definitely, like we said, it wasn't like I particularly wanted to do this album, which it is a great album, but I wanted to talk about just Fugazi in general as well, because that's just, this album is one of the cogs that makes Fugazi run.
You gotta talk about the album in the context of where they are as a band.
Right.
We're not gonna talk about two or three albums from now. We're gonna talk about in the sense of like
how we got to this point,
how we got to here, and what's maybe gonna come after like as far as soundscape. We're not gonna,
right.
We kind of delved into that as far as like getting their other producer back. So now you have an influence, at least for your follow up to this one.
Right, but it does seem kind of strange that there wasn't just like a debut album drop, boom, date. So
does that lead to the self-production of this album? You know what I mean? Maybe was it the band putting it out?
The pre-order copy is kind of a crazy idea because that might have been one way to like earn the money.
Discord probably making the overall decision.
Right.
So
but you would think if they did the pre-buy thing, right? How much did you say?
160,000.
So that money probably was the money that they used to record the album.
In pre-orders?
You would think so, right? You pre-order, you get the money. They already got the money, so they needed that money to go in there and have the budget to spend on doing an album. 30 days in the studio.
I think they may have gotten that budget just from the 260 days of touring.
You would think so too.
I mean, merchandise sales and all that. Lot. Yeah.
Well, the thing about them is what I've learned. Total DIY, and I think they were like notorious about putting when they sold an album that like inside the album art, it would have the price of the album, what they're going to sell it for.
Oh.
So a record store can never charge more
than what they listed the
price. So you can't over upsell my shit. You can't buy it and sell it for more money to make money off of it, to make profit, to make it into this thing like franchise me. This band is not a franchise band. Never moved on to a bigger label, even though that they possibly damn well could have.
Reminds me of snacks, like when it's like listed on $1, like the store cannot charge more than that.
Do not individually sell this item.
Exactly.
Yes. Exactly. They were notorious for doing that.
Yeah.
Shirts as well. So if you like see a shirt that's like insanely priced by it's a Fugazi shirt and you find it insanely priced, even if someone's selling it online and it's a vintage shirt, like if you're a true Fugazi fan, like you would know
not to sell it over what
the
shirt
exactly
says, so.
You just that's not what this band was about. It was never about making money. A lot of their shows that they played were for free as well. So so you say you want 100 and 250 dates. They weren't trying to make money off of anyone. So you got to kind of think like they kind of needed, I'm thinking they needed the pre-orders to get into the studio. 30 days probably was a lot of money still.
Sure. I think maybe the pre-orders, I don't know about the recording because they are fat. It was January to February in recording. I don't know when pre-orders started,
True.
And then
I'm guessing.
Because we don't know when the date of the album releases, so we can't really put pre-orders in context of.
We've just been guessing this whole time.
I mean, you could put it in January and February, March, April, May, June, July. 5 months later, they put the album out. So in that time, there's
right. So yeah,
they're collecting these pre-orders, and I would assume maybe the pre-order money maybe helps that tour, or even the merch for that, like Discord. It's all going to Discord.
Well, you gotta produce the thing, right? You gotta
print it.
Exactly. Which back then it probably wasn't that cheap, and we're just now getting started with CDs in the time frame when CDs came out. Yeah. That's fucking expensive shit.
Three things because they're still selling cassettes. I looked it up.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you have vinyl, cassette.
And then getting the CD is pristine. You know what I mean?
I could see Discord just throwing all that pre-order money to
probably distribution.
Yeah, getting it all physically made. So.
And maybe pushing the album out a little bit more than they did with the first one.
Yeah.
See if they can make more of a bigger shake in the water, being such a small label and having such a heavy fucking hitting band underneath. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, let's get into another song.
Cool. Pump out Dear Justice Letter.
My favorite song on the album.
Second to the last album, and like you say, very political. So let's check it out. What's he got to say?
Ooh, baby. Ooh, baby,
Oh, what an amazing track.
That's a great song.
It starts off so badass, and they don't take any time to get into that chorus. It explodes immediately, and fucking love the double backup.
Talk about calling someone out.
Yeah.
Saying your name.
Just screaming
just
it.
As Brand.
Screaming it. All right. Any thoughts on this other than we can't wait to get to other Fugazi albums? The weird thing is it's like most stuff comes out in like June. Most albums.
Yeah.
I think they have one in October that I get to do, and then I have to wait till June. The other ones, but next year to talk about this again. We're gonna get to some gore pretty soon.
Oh shit!
At least I am. Because I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna gush. I'm gonna gush the entire time, like I've been gushing right now, of just how much I fucking love this band, and suggest to everyone that has not listened to Fugazi, just pick an album. It doesn't matter which one. Just pick a fucking album and just listen to it a couple times. Just get a feel for it. Mm-hmm. Just put it on there.
Cruise
in the background. Clean your house.
Yeah.
Anything. Work out. I guarantee you're going to fucking fall in love with it. I don't care who you are.
Would you recommend somebody listening to it out of context with the lyrics? Or like, this album's pretty political, so dive in maybe sometimes, I don't know. Sometimes I have trouble really hearing pronunciations in this album, like we were talking
rolling
about rolling R's and saying things weird. So
it's awesome.
Do you think maybe is Fugazi a lyric band that we should listen to and read? Or are they
Definitely. Once you start understanding because of how they say the words and how they kind of hide some stuff on the pronunciation, like you were saying, their lyrics are fucking brilliant, and they do really have a message and things to say. Besides for how good the music is. And this might be the opposite of what I was like, I want to do gore. Like, maybe this is the worst part of Fugazi. It's like, the music is so fucking good that no one cares too much about the lyrics.
Yes.
And everyone says everything about how crazy the lyrics is in gore and forgets about how fucking good the music really fucking is. Mm-hmm. So being that good of a band and doing this with your lyrics, I think if you're a true fan, you will start to understand what he's saying. And it's fucking brilliant. Mm-hmm. And it's not always political. Not ever. This is, like they said, this is their political kind of stab album. They definitely talk about that more, but they're brilliant. Mm-hmm. Lyrically, musically, just being fucking, like, I'm so happy this band exists. It inspires me to play to this day. Like, it just makes me like, I gotta practice more. That's all I fucking think about.
In looking them up, I saw a picture of them performing at Emo's, and it had the Emo's thing in the background. It was like the old Emo sign.
Yeah.
It just brought a little smile. I was like, damn, that's awesome. God. They at one point were killing it here in town too. So if only we could have been around in '91 or whenever, rolling through.
Yeah. God. Well,
we've been right down the street.
Fuck. All right. Well, this has been fucking great. Thanks for everyone who listened. We didn't play any ads this time because it's not about that. We want you to listen to these songs on these albums and just fucking pump them out. It's probably one of the best things about this. Little factoids. Listen to those songs. We get to listen to them in between the episodes. So definitely, thanks, y'all.
All right, and exit only, I believe. We're gonna
exit only with the first track on the album, but we thought it was appropriate because of the title.
For sure.